a lot of success. You guys do so much for your portfolio companies. Tell us about some of the pitfalls that companies experience when expanding.
The number one thing that I see initially is the inability to actually create a retention across a new team. So without understanding the cultural norms, without understanding the expectations of pay, if you move too quickly and don't have an established business, oftentimes you will see that churn quite a bit on a new team. So I think oftentimes the genesis of that comes with trying to do this at a one full swoop or looking at this in a short-term goal or sprint versus thinking about how can we have a founder-led sales start to lead and get a feel for this and then build a team around this with the culture that has made you successful originally in your current region. And then the other area that I think about often is the inability of understanding what the cost of this is going to be, not only on a new go-to-market motion, but also on a product. Oftentimes there are, we've talked about the regulatory issues, but there's also a lot of different expectations from how advanced certain industries are. So when it comes to a new product, being able to stay competitive, being able to be innovative is also a really big product conversation from a geographical expansion standpoint. So again, I mentioned this idea of not just approaching this from a singular sales perspective, but actually really starting to build a plan cross-functionally and thinking about how do we tackle this from a product, from a go-to-market, and a people perspective as well.
I think not treating a region as a monolith. So moving into Europe as a monolith, so like as one entity, right? Like moving into Europe is really different if you're going to the UK or if you're going to France or you're going to Germany. It's going to look really, really different. Or saying like you're going to expand to Asia. Okay, what does that mean? Is specifically what country you're expanding into and what's your execution plan? The number of kind of pitch decks I've seen, especially at the growth stage, where it's, all right, we're hidden on market share in the US, but don't worry, we have international expansion. If you go to Europe, it's massive. You go to Asia, it's massive. Okay, but what does that mean tactically? What specific regions are you going to expand into tactically? What's the competitive landscape like there? What's the buyer like there? It means a lot of different things where you are. So, expanding into Europe means a lot of different things depending on which country specifically you're moving into.
Yeah, I agree with that point 100%. We have companies where they say like, hey, we have a sales team in France, but that sales team, like, they don't speak German, and German buyers want to buy from German sellers and things like that. So agreed 100%. I think the other kind of common mistake that we'll see and sometimes pitfall is it's a bit of a chicken and an egg of I want to have international growth, should I expand to a foreign country? But you don't already have some type of like existing pull there to verify the market, and so you'll say, okay, I'll set up an office and I'll have a sales rep, but all of a sudden you have a fixed cost base, and then people will realize, hey, there's not enough demand to actually justify having this fixed cost base. So I think one thing that we oftentimes encourage companies to do is, work with channel partners, work with distributors, Salesforce ecosystem, give you guys a shout out. Those can be like really effective ways to access new countries and start to build those relationships, start to see what the demand is, and start to see whether that's worth having a foreign office and kind of a direct presence there. And then the second thing I'd say is, I think people underestimate how much selling into a new market can be like going back to day one and being a startup again. If you may have a really established brand here in the US, but you start to sell in Germany and you don't have any type of brand, and people will ask for reference customers, and maybe a German buyer wants a German customer that they know, and a US customer is just not really a referenceable customer for them. And so I think, understanding that some of the payback on some of those investments may be longer and more akin to kind of the early days of starting your company. When you work with startups, every day is a new type of challenge. Not that I can think of any off the top of my head, but we've definitely had, situations where you run into, for example, when you lay people off in foreign countries, what is owed is very different. And sometimes our companies, even if someone is maybe a contractor vis-a-vis, a full employee or otherwise, people won't necessarily know that until it's a little bit too late and it's a little bit of an oopsie whoopsie. And so I think, no specific examples, but I'm sure that, that happens frequently.